The Black Sun Dominion had been a shadow across the galaxy for centuries. The Empire, led by the enigmatic and immortal Emperor Malreth, was a force of unrelenting darkness. With every world the Dominion conquered, it drained life and hope from the inhabitants, their souls consumed by the Black Sun's unholy power. The once proud civilizations of humanity were now scattered remnants, barely holding on in the corners of the galaxy. Captain Vane was among those remnants. The hardened leader, she had spent years on the fringes, fighting in small skirmishes against the Dominion's overwhelming might. Her ship, the Valiant Star, was a patchwork of old warships and salvage technology, just like the crew she commanded. They were all outcasts, survivors of a world left behind, thrown together by a common enemy. Despite the odds stacked against them, Vane believed in one thing: humanity would rise again, or it would burn trying. On the edge of known space, deep within a system that had long been forgotten, Vane's crew had found something, an artifact. She held it now in her hands, its surface etched with symbols no one could decipher, a relic from an ancient civilization lost to time. What its true power was, she couldn't say, but something in her gut told her that it was the key to defeating Malreth. They couldn't afford to leave it behind. Her first officer, Eric Thorne, stood at the doorway, watching her silently as she examined the artifact. His face was drawn with worry. "Captain, are you sure about this? The Dominion has eyes everywhere. If we stay much longer, they'll find us." Vane set the artifact down gently on the table, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We don't have a choice. If we don't act now, the Dominion will continue their conquest unchecked. We found something here, something important. We can't let them get their hands on it." Thorne nodded, though there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. "And what if it's a trap? What if this artifact is just another Dominion weapon? Something to lure us in?" Vane met his gaze. "Then we die fighting, just like the rest. But I'm betting it's not a trap. It's something older, something the Dominion doesn't understand." Just as she turned back to the artifact, a sudden beat from the comm system cut through the silence. A voice crackled over the speaker, low and distorted. "This is the Nightshade. We're under attack. Dominion ships, 2 clicks out. They've found us." Her heart raced. The Nightshade was one of her closest allies, a renegade ship manned by a small but capable crew. They had been trailing her for weeks, gathering intel on Dominion movements. Now, their luck had run out. Vane's mind raced. There was no time to hesitate. "Thorne, get the crew to the weapons bay. Prepare for immediate launch." She turned to the comms officer, a young woman named Lyra, whose hands shook as she worked. "Alert the Nightshade. We need to get out of here, now." The screens blinked with static as the communication link to the Nightshade failed. "Captain, they're jammed. I can't reach them." "We don't need to reach them," Vane said, determination hardening her voice. "We get out, or we fight. Either way, we survive." The ship's engines hummed to life, a heartbeat in the cold void of space. Vane looked out at the stars, the darkness creeping closer with every passing second. "All hands, brace for impact," she called, her voice resolute. The crew scattered, preparing for the inevitable battle, but Captain Vane stood tall, eyes locked on the artifact. If this was her last mission, she would make it count. The Valiant Star shot through the system, a trail of fire behind them as the first wave of Dominion ships appeared on the scanners. But Vane didn't flinch. She had a mission to complete, and for humanity to survive, it had to succeed. The Nightshade would hold its ground, but whether Vane's crew could survive the coming onslaught remained to be seen. The battle was brutal and swift. Vane's ship, the Valiant Star, tore through the void, narrowly evading the Dominion's first volley of laser fire. The enemy ships were closing in, their sleek black hulls cutting through space with an eerie precision. The Nightshade was nowhere to be seen on the scanners, and Vane's pulse quickened. She had hoped they would rendezvous before the Dominion arrived, but now it seemed that hope was slipping away. "Captain, we can't outrun them," Eric Thorne called from the helm, his voice tight with urgency. "The Nightshade is too far to make contact. We're on our own." Vane gritted her teeth. The odds were stacked against them again, but she had never been one to run from a fight. "What are their weapons capabilities?" "Their primary weapons are pulse cannons, high yield, but they take a few seconds to recharge. We can use that against them if we time it right." "Good. We'll need every second." Vane's eyes flicked to the artifact still sitting on the table in the command room. She had no idea what it was or how it worked, but she knew one thing: it was their only chance. She was beginning to suspect that whatever secrets it held could unravel everything the Dominion had built, but they had no time to investigate further. She needed to buy them some space to figure it out. "Lara, patch me into the comm system," Vane commanded. Her voice was calm but commanding, as it always was in times of crisis. The young comms officer quickly complied. Vane tapped into the Dominion ship's frequency, sending out a signal that would temporarily confuse their targeting systems. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy them a few precious seconds. "This is Captain Vane of the Valiant Star," she said, her voice loud and steady. "We surrender. Disable your weapons and we'll cooperate. You know you don't want another fight." Silence. Then a cold, mechanical voice echoed through the comms. "Captain Vane, you are far from home. Surrender now, and your crew will be spared. Resist, and you will be annihilated." Her hand tightened on the controls. "The only thing I plan to surrender," she muttered under her breath, "is the Dominion's grip on this galaxy." She glanced at Eric, who was already anticipating her next move. With a quick nod, they initiated a series of evasive maneuvers, dodging blasts from the Dominion ships. The Valiant Star shuddered as their shields absorbed the incoming fire. They had minutes at most before their shields failed. Then, an unexpected change in the comms made Vane freeze. Another voice crackled through, this one more familiar, more human. It was the voice of Captain Malther, a long-lost ally from Earth's military days, someone Vane had thought dead after the First Dominion War. "Vane, you never learn. Surrender now. Your fight is pointless. The Dominion is eternal." Vane's stomach churned at the sound of his voice. Malther had once been a brother in arms, someone she trusted with her life. But that was before he'd betrayed humanity and joined the Dominion's cause. Now he was an agent of the Black Sun, hunting down those who dared resist. "I know you're still in there, Malther," she called back through the comms. "You're not just a puppet for Malreth. Fight with us, and we can end this." For a long, agonizing moment, there was only silence. Then, Malther's voice came through again, but this time, it was tinged with a trace of hesitation. "Foolishness. You will understand soon enough." Before Vane could respond, the communication cut off abruptly, replaced by a deafening burst of static. Then, the Nightshade appeared out of nowhere, swooping in from a nearby asteroid field, unleashing a barrage of fire on the Dominion ships, throwing them off course. "We're not dead yet," Eric shouted, his voice full of relief. The battle was far from over, but for now, Vane's team had a fighting chance. As they continued to evade the relentless assault, Vane's mind raced. Malther's words lingered in her thoughts. There was something deeper going on here. The Black Sun's influence was far-reaching, corrupting even the strongest minds. But what was it that made Malther so certain of the Dominion's victory? What did he know that they didn't? Suddenly, the artifact began to glow faintly, its strange symbols shifting beneath the surface. Vane's heart skipped a beat. The artifact, once dormant, was waking up, and with it, perhaps the answers they desperately needed. "Get us to the nearest moon," Vane commanded. "We need to buy time. We need to understand this artifact before the next wave hits." Her crew scrambled to comply, but as the Valiant Star plunged deeper into the asteroid field, Vane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. The cold surface of the moon was a harsh contrast to the tension that gripped the valiant star. The crew had managed to slip through the Dominion's grasp for the moment, but Vane knew it was only a matter of time before they were hunted down again. The moon they had chosen was desolate, barren of life, save for the twisted remnants of an ancient civilization. The surface was scarred by craters and dust storms, a place forgotten by most, save for those few who sought refuge or shelter on the fringes of the galaxy. Vane paced the command deck, her mind racing with thoughts of Malther's words. "The Dominion is eternal." The phrase echoed in her thoughts, a grim reminder of the insurmountable odds they faced. The Black Sun's power was growing by the day, and even though they had managed to outmaneuver the enemy for now, Vane could sense the presence of something darker, something more sinister, lurking just beyond the horizon. The artifact, now secured in a containment chamber, pulsed with an eerie, unnatural glow. It was no longer just a curiosity, it had become a beacon. Every time they moved, the artifact seemed to respond, its ancient symbols shifting and rearranging themselves, as if it were calling to something. Something waiting, somewhere out there in the vast emptiness of space. Thorn approached Vane, his expression grim. "Captain, we've picked up a strange signal. It's faint, but it's coming from the surface of this moon. We've triangulated it. It's not Dominion, but it's definitely not ours." Vane's brow furrowed. "Anomaly?" "Not quite. It's more like a message. A signal from a long-lost civilization. But it's broken, fragmented. We can't make out much, but it's clear this place holds more secrets than we thought." Vane turned to face him, her eyes narrowed. The artifact had brought them here for a reason. They had to follow the trail, no matter where it led. "Get the team ready. We're going down." The air on the moon was thin and the gravity weak, making movement awkward as they donned their exosuits. As they made their way to the drop shuttle, Vane could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. Every step they took felt like they were walking deeper into a trap, but there was no other choice. They needed answers. They needed to understand the artifact, and they needed to know what had drawn them to this forsaken place. The shuttle descended onto the moon's surface with a soft thud, the barren landscape stretching out before them in every direction. Jagged rock formations loomed in the distance, and the dust storms kicked up occasionally, obscuring their visibility. The planet's skies were perpetually dark, the faint outline of the black sun visible even from here, casting an ominous glow across the desolate terrain. The team advanced cautiously, following the signal, which grew stronger as they approached a large, ancient structure hidden within a canyon. It was unlike anything they had seen before, towering monolithic spires, their surfaces etched with symbols that matched the patterns on the artifact. As they stepped closer, the very air seemed to hum with a strange energy, as if the entire place were alive. "This is it," Vane murmured, her voice reverberating in the silence. "This is what the artifact was leading us to." They entered the structure, the walls slick with age and the air thick with dust. The central chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows. At the heart of the room was a massive stone altar, surrounded by ancient machinery, some of which seemed to have been long dormant. The signal emanated from here, its source buried deep within the altar. Vane's heart pounded as she moved toward the altar, her fingers tracing the stone's surface. The symbols etched into it were the same as the ones on the artifact. But as her hand touched the stone, a pulse of energy surged through her, sending a shockwave of force that knocked her back, sending her crashing to the ground. "Captain," Thorn shouted, rushing to her side. Vane's vision swam as she struggled to her feet, her body tingling with the aftershock. "I'm fine," she muttered, shaking her head to clear the disorienting effects. The artifact in her pocket seemed to pulse in response, almost as if it had reacted to the energy release. "Whatever is in that altar," Thorn said, his voice low with awe, "it's connected to the artifact. It's like they're calling to each other." Vane stood, wiping the dust from her suit. She felt it then, a shift in the atmosphere, as if something had awakened deep within the moon. A distant, low rumble echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the walls. The structure around them began to tremble. "We're not alone," Vane said softly. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open, sending a massive shockwave through the chamber. A figure emerged from the depths, a being of dark energy, its form indistinct but terrifying, its presence suffocating. It had been here, waiting for them. Vane's breath caught in her throat. Whatever had been lying dormant in this ancient place had just woken up, and now it was about to make its presence felt. The crew's only hope was to survive long enough to decipher what they had uncovered, but time was running out. The Black Sun's influence was already here, and with it, something far older and far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. "We need to get back to the ship now," Vane ordered, but the being had already begun to move, and they were trapped. The being before them stirred, its form a shifting mass of dark energy and void. Its shape flickered and twisted like a mirage, its presence warping the very air around them. The air grew dense, thick with an unnatural cold that seeped into their bones. Vane's breath caught in her throat as her eyes locked on the creature. It was ancient, older than the Dominion, older than the galaxy itself, a force that seemed to predate even the universe's creation. "Get back to the shuttle, now." Vane barked, but her voice felt small, insignificant against the looming terror in front of her. The crew scrambled, weapons drawn, but it was clear their efforts would be futile. The being didn't move in the way they expected. There were no footsteps, no physical presence to track. It simply was. Its very existence warped the space around it, bending light and matter into something unrecognizable. Thorn fired a shot, a bright beam of energy, but it passed through the creature with no effect. The figure flared with an unsettling pulse, and the air itself seemed to vibrate, making the ground beneath their feet tremble. "Nothing works," Thorn shouted, retreating a few steps. "It's not real. It's not a physical thing." Vane clenched her fists. "We don't know that for sure. Keep firing." But as Thorn prepared to fire again, the creature's form shifted once more, suddenly flaring outward in an explosion of energy that sent the crew flying back. The shockwave shattered the stone walls of the chamber, sending debris and dust flying through the air. Vane's head slammed against the stone floor, and for a moment, everything went black. When her vision cleared, she found herself alone. The other members of her crew were scattered, either unconscious or struggling to regain their footing. But the creature was still there, hovering just above the altar, its attention focused solely on Vane. As she pushed herself to her feet, a strange realization washed over her. This being wasn't attacking in the way they'd expected. It wasn't here to destroy them, not yet. It was studying them. It was learning, assessing their strength. Vane's heart raced as she drew her sidearm. The weapon was a standard-issue energy blaster, one she had used in countless battles, but now it felt laughably inadequate. The air around her shimmered with the same energy that radiated from the creature. What are you?" she demanded, her voice shaky but determined. The creature's form pulsed, and for a fleeting moment, Vane thought she saw something behind the shadow, a glimpse of eyes, ancient and unfathomable, watching her. Then, in her mind, a voice echoed, ancient and alien. It was neither male nor female, nor even truly one voice at all. It was as though it came from the very core of the galaxy, reverberating through her thoughts. "You awaken me, child of the stars. You do not yet understand the consequences of your actions." Vane's hand tightened on her weapon. "What consequences? Who are you?" The voice returned, filled with a quiet cosmic sorrow. "I am the Keeper, bound by ancient rights. I am the force that defied the Black Sun, the one that sealed its power for eons. The artifact you carry is not your salvation, it is your destruction." A shiver ran down Vane's spine. The artifact. The very object that had brought them here, the thing they had hoped would be humanity's key to defeating the Dominion, was now a harbinger of doom. The creature's energy flared again, and the room seemed to pulse with an overwhelming intensity. Vane staggered back as the ground beneath her feet cracked, but she held her ground. "Why did you wake up now?" she asked, her voice rising above the rumble of the shifting moon. "Why us? Why now?" The Keeper's voice reverberated in her mind once more. "You, human, are the final spark in an age-long war. The Black Sun has returned, and its influence spreads once more. I too am bound to that dark power, but it is you, the child of the stars, who will either seal it away for good or allow it to consume everything." Vane's head spun. The Black Sun. The Keeper was bound to it. What had once been a force for salvation, a symbol of hope, was now part of the very entity they fought against. The Dominion's empire, the eternal darkness that had crushed humanity and sought to extinguish all life. And now she realized she was standing at the very edge of a precipice, on the threshold of a conflict that could determine the fate of the galaxy. Would she be the one to wield the power to save them? Or would she fall into the same abyss that had claimed so many before? Vane steadied herself, eyes narrowing. "Then we'll fight, whatever it takes." The Keeper's form pulsed again, and for a moment, it seemed to soften, as though understanding her resolve. "Then your path is set, human. But know this, the cost of victory will be high. The Dominion will stop at nothing to claim what you hold, and if you fail, all will be lost." The tremors beneath them grew stronger as the creature's power began to coalesce into a force far greater than anything Vane had ever faced. They were not alone in this battle. The darkness was already here, and it was coming for them. The ground beneath them cracked open again, the tremors shaking the structure to its very core. Vane barely managed to steady herself against the altar's stone base as the Keeper's form expanded dark tendrils of energy, reaching out like the grasping fingers of a long-dead god. The air crackled with the force of the being's power, each pulse of its energy rippling through the moon's surface, sending waves of distortion through the fabric of space itself. "We need to leave, Captain," Thorn shouted, his voice strained, but Vane could see the same realization in his eyes that she felt deep in her chest. There was no escaping. Not from the Keeper, and not from the Dominion. "No," Vane said firmly, her gaze never leaving the shifting entity before her. "We can't run from this. We have to understand it, or everything will be lost." Lara, still recovering from the shockwave, staggered to her feet. "Captain, the artifact, it's reacting again," she yelled, pointing to the small device, now glowing more intensely than ever. The symbols on its surface seemed to move with purpose, shifting and pulsing in time with the energy emanating from the Keeper. "Let's go, Vane. The artifact's energy is too dangerous. It's pulling everything into a gravitational collapse," Thorn warned, his voice desperate. "We don't have much time." Vane looked at the artifact again, her thoughts racing. If it was pulling everything toward collapse, then they had no choice but to act quickly. But what was the artifact's true purpose? Was it designed to seal the Keeper away, or was it a trap to unleash something even worse? The Keeper's dark tendrils lashed out toward them, but they stopped short, as though some invisible barrier had been placed between them and the being. A deep, guttural voice, like the groaning of a dying star, filled her mind again. "The cycle repeats. You cannot outrun your destiny, child of stars. The artifact will either destroy you or empower you. The Dominion has already set the wheels in motion. You are but pawns in their game." Vane's pulse quickened. The Keeper's words were chilling, but they also rang with truth. The Dominion wasn't just after control, it was after something far more dangerous. The power that could either shackle the Keeper forever or release it fully into the galaxy. It was clear now, they weren't just facing a battle for survival, they were facing an existential war for the very essence of the universe. "We won't be pawns," Vane said through gritted teeth, stepping forward with a defiance that even she hadn't known she had. She looked to Thorn and Lyra, prepared to defend the artifact. "I'm going to try something." Thorn hesitated. What do you mean, Captain? What are you going to do? Vane drew her weapon and raised it to the artifact, aiming carefully at the swirling symbols on its surface. I'm going to see if I can stabilize it. If we don't act fast, this entire moon might collapse into itself. The Keeper is connected to the artifact, but we don't know how. We need to figure out its purpose before it figures out ours. With a steady hand, she pressed a sequence of buttons on the artifact's interface, her fingers moving swiftly despite the chaos unfolding around them. She wasn't sure what would happen, but she knew they had no other option. If the artifact was truly the key to stopping the Dominion's ultimate weapon, it had to be understood now. The artifact hummed, and for a brief moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath as the device pulsed with energy. The Keeper's form flickered, its tendrils curling like the fingers of an invisible hand reaching toward the artifact, drawn to it by an irresistible force. Suddenly, the room around them shifted again. The very fabric of space seemed to stretch and bend, distorting reality. The Keeper's massive, shadowy figure began to fragment as though it was being pulled into a vortex, a rift in the very fabric of space that the artifact had opened. The sensation was unbearable, like standing on the edge of a collapsing star, everything around them warping and spinning. Vane felt herself being drawn toward the rift, her body pulled by an unseen force. Thorn and Lyra both staggered back, their feet barely holding them in place. Captain! Lyra screamed as the rift grew larger, consuming everything in its path. But then, Vane's eyes snapped open with sudden clarity. The artifact had stopped glowing. It was no longer drawing them toward destruction. It was holding the rift open. You awaken the ancient power. Now you must control it if you wish to survive. The Keeper's voice reverberated one last time, filled with a mixture of contempt and reluctant respect. The cycle is broken, but only by your will. The fate of this galaxy will be decided in your hands. Before Vane could comprehend what the Keeper meant, the ground beneath her feet began to collapse, sending them all tumbling toward the rift. She had no choice now but to act on instinct. Hold on to each other, Vane shouted as she grabbed Thorn's arm and Lyra's hand. The rift pulsed again, pulling them toward the heart of its gravity well. The valiant star was still waiting outside, but there was no telling if they would escape the aftermath of what was happening on this moon. No matter what happened next, they were at the center of something much larger than themselves. Whatever the Keeper had meant by the cycle, they were now part of it, and the universe would never be the same again. The rift swallowed them whole, pulling them through a tunnel of blinding light and shadow. For a split second, Vane felt as if her body was being torn apart, her molecules scattered across the vast expanse of the universe. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything snapped back into place, and she found herself standing on solid ground once again, though not the ground she had expected. The air was heavy, thick with a suffocating energy. The space around them was dark, an endless void, save for a single point of light far in the distance. A cold, dim star that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. The stars themselves seemed wrong here, warped and stretched as though the laws of physics had been bent beyond recognition. Vane could feel the very fabric of reality groaning under the strain, like a fabric fraying at the edges. "Where are we?" Thorn gasped, his voice strained as he looked around, eyes wide with disbelief. Vane didn't answer immediately. She was too distracted by the disorienting, unnatural landscape surrounding them. It wasn't a moon, nor a planet. It was something else entirely, somewhere beyond the reach of known space, a place that existed in the gaps between realities. She could feel the weight of it pressing in from all sides, as if the very air were alive, watching, waiting. Then she saw it, the thing that had been waiting for them. The Keeper. It stood in the center of the void, its dark, shifting form flickering like an ancient shadow. It seemed larger here, more powerful, its tendrils of energy writhing like serpents in the dark. The cold, alien gaze of its countless eyes met hers. "You have crossed the threshold," the Keeper's voice echoed in her mind, reverberating through the very core of her being. "You are no longer in your universe. This is the heart of darkness, the space between all worlds. Here, you will find the truth." "Truth?" Vane whispered, her voice hoarse as she gripped her weapon tighter. She wasn't sure if it would even work in this place, but instinct kept her fingers wrapped around it. The Keeper's form rippled, and a fragment of an ancient vision flashed before her eyes, a glimpse of the Dominion's origins, of the Black Sun's rise to power, and the forgotten war that had nearly destroyed everything. The Keeper had been there, at the center of it all, a witness to the creation of the Dominion's eternal empire and the cataclysmic rise of its dark influence. "I was the one who sealed the Black Sun away," the Keeper continued, its voice now a whisper in the cold emptiness. "But the artifact you carry, human, is the key to unlocking the Black Sun's true power." Vane's heart skipped a beat. The artifact wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a shield. It was the key to something far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined. The Keeper had sealed the Black Sun away once before, and now it was up to them to do it again, or else the universe would fall into an age of eternal darkness. "No," Vane muttered, shaking her head. "We won't let that happen." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. They were already too late. The Dominion had found them, and the Black Sun was closer than ever. The Keeper wasn't just a threat. They were a part of the dark force that had shaped the universe in its image. If they didn't act quickly, they would be consumed by the very entity they were trying to destroy. The Keeper's tendrils lashed out, swirling with dark energy that seemed to pulse in time with the distant flickering star. "You have awakened me, human, and now you will see the full extent of your power, or the limits of your defiance." Vane's breath caught in her throat as the Keeper's presence intensified, bending the very air around them. The star in the distance flared brighter, and Vane realized with sudden clarity that it wasn't just a star, it was a black hole, its event horizon pulling everything into its gravity well, sucking the surrounding space into its insatiable depths. "This isn't just a war," Vane whispered, her eyes widening with the realization. "This is a battle for existence itself." Thorn looked at her, his expression hardening. "We can't stop it alone, Captain. We need to figure out what the artifact can do, and fast." Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. "The Keeper said we were the key. What if the artifact can shift reality? What if we can use it to lock this place away again?" Vane turned to face the artifact, now glowing with a soft, pulsing light in her hand. It was responding to the Keeper, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. A choice loomed before her, a choice that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Could she wield the artifact's power to stop the Black Sun? Or would its activation lead to their destruction, unraveling the very fabric of reality in the process? There was no time to think. The Keeper was growing more powerful by the second, its form expanding, warping the very space around them. The black hole loomed closer, its gravitational pull tugging at everything in the void. "We have no choice," Vane said firmly, her voice resolute. "We fight now, or we lose everything." With one final, defiant breath, she raised the artifact and plunged it into the heart of the void, hoping against all odds that they could control the darkness before it consumed them all. The moment Vane activated the artifact, a surge of energy rippled through the void, sending a shockwave that tore through the very fabric of space around them. The black hole pulsed, as though it had felt the presence of the artifact, its gravity field warping and distorting with violent force. The Keeper's form wavered, flickering as if it, too, were being affected by the artifact's power. For a brief second, Vane felt herself caught between two realities, the familiar weight of her own body and the crushing, alien presence of the void that surrounded them. She could hear her heartbeat, thundering in her ears, while the air seemed to thicken with a deep cosmic hum. The artifact pulsed in her hand, an uncontrollable energy that threatened to overwhelm her. It was as though she were holding the universe itself in her grasp. Vane, Thorn's voice broke through the haze of her thoughts. The artifact, what's happening to it? Vane's eyes snapped open as the artifact flared with blinding light, its symbols spinning wildly as though alive. The Keeper's voice rose in a chorus of distorted whispers, a million voices from across the eons, all speaking at once. You cannot control it, human. You do not understand what you awaken. The black sun is eternal, and its shadow will never fade. The words echoed in her mind, a barrage of ancient knowledge and despair. But Vane didn't falter. She could feel the artifact's power growing, feeding off the energy of the black hole, drawing on the same primal force that had once been sealed away. This was no longer just a fight against the Dominion. It was a battle against the very nature of existence itself. Thorn, Vane shouted over the cacophony. We need to stabilize it. Now. Lyra was already moving, her fingers flying over her console, desperately attempting to synchronize their systems with the artifact's erratic energy pulses. The ship's systems flickered and whined as the rift continued to pull everything into its gravitational pull, but Lyra's focus never wavered. The artifact is stabilizing, she called, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. But I can't hold it much longer. The Keeper's tendrils lashed toward them, its form growing in size and power. The dark energy it radiated became a physical force, like a storm of black lightning, crackling through the air. Vane could feel her bones vibrating with the intensity of it, and for a moment, she thought the very atoms of her body might come apart. You are fools, the Keeper's voice boomed, filled with a mix of rage and sorrow. You cannot stop the coming darkness. The black sun will rise again, and all will fall beneath its shadow. You have no place in this cycle, no power to break it. Vane's hand tightened around the artifact, and she took a steadying breath. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. If they didn't act now, everything would be lost. She couldn't let the Keeper's words dictate the future. She would break the cycle. With a burst of energy, the artifact's light intensified, becoming a blinding beam that shot straight toward the center of the black hole. The air trembled as the beam collided with the event horizon, sending a shockwave of energy that rippled outward in every direction. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Then, the world exploded in a wave of force. The shockwave tore through the fabric of the rift, and Vane felt herself being thrown backward, her body slamming against the ground with bone-shattering force. The blinding light from the artifact filled the void, pushing back the encroaching darkness of the Keeper and the black hole, forcing them to recede like shadows at the dawn of a new day. The Keeper's form began to disintegrate, its tendrils unraveling in the light as if they were nothing more than smoke. The whispers of 1,000 voices faded, replaced by a deep, resonating silence. Vane, dazed and gasping for breath, tried to focus her blurred vision on the scene before her. The rift was collapsing, the black hole shrinking back into nothingness, its gravitational pull weakening until it finally ceased to exist altogether. The Keeper's presence vanished completely, leaving only the fading echoes of its power. Is it over? Thorn's voice sounded distant, as if coming from the far end of a tunnel. Vane struggled to her feet, her body aching from the impact. Her eyes scanned the now empty void, and for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe. The rift had closed. The black hole was gone. The Keeper had been silenced. But the victory felt hollow. The galaxy had been saved, but at what cost? The artifact was still in her hand, its power fading but not gone. They had sealed the darkness away for now, but Vane knew that nothing in the universe stayed sealed forever. The battle's won, she said softly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. But the war is far from over. They had stopped the black sun's rise for now, but the Dominion still lurked in the shadows, its influence reaching into the corners of the galaxy. The artifact had proven itself to be more than just a tool. It was a key, a harbinger of what was to come. and no matter what they did next, the galaxy would never be the same. Vane looked up, eyes hard with resolve. We'll fight on, we'll rebuild, and we'll ensure the black sun never rises again. The void around them had been purged of the black sun's consuming shadow, but the lingering presence of the artifact reminded Vane of how fragile the peace truly was. The vast emptiness had returned to an eerie calm, and yet the damage was done. The rift was closed, the keeper was silenced, but the battle had uncovered a truth that weighed heavily on her heart. This was not the end. This was only a temporary reprieve. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable, as the trio gathered around the artifact, which now lay dormant in Vane's hands. Its once blinding glow had dimmed to a faint pulse, as though it were tired, resting from the cataclysmic power it had unleashed. Lyra was the first to break the silence. "Captain, we did it," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. She was staring at the artifact with a mix of awe and trepidation, still grappling with the enormity of what they had just faced. Vane nodded slowly. "Yes, we stopped the black sun, for now, but I'm afraid we've only seen the beginning." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? The keeper is gone. The rift is sealed. It's over, is it?" Vane asked, her voice quieter now, filled with the weight of an unspoken truth. "We've sealed the black sun from the physical universe, but we haven't destroyed its power. The Dominion is still out there, waiting. They will come for the artifact. They will try to harness its power. Then we'll stop them," Thorn said, his jaw setting in determination. Vane shook her head, the faintest glimmer of doubt crossing her face. "It's not that simple. The Dominion has known about the black sun for millennia. They've been searching for ways to control it, to bend it to their will, and now they know we have the artifact." Lyra stepped forward, her expression resolute. "So we go after them. We track them down before they can regroup." "It's not just about them," Vane said, her gaze shifting toward the dark expanse. "The black sun is a power beyond any single empire. It existed before the Dominion, before the Keeper. It was the force that shaped the universe, a constant force of entropy, destruction, and creation. What if controlling it is the key to something else? What if they can weaponize it in ways we can't even imagine?" Thorn's face twisted in confusion. "You mean we're just supposed to keep running? Hide from them forever?" "No," Vane replied firmly. "We fight, but we do it on our terms. We need to learn more about the artifact. Find out how it works, how it was created. We need to understand the black sun, not just stop it." She turned toward the distant horizon, where stars blinked and pulsed with unnatural energy, the remnants of the black hole still visible as a faint, rippling distortion in the sky. Her fingers curled around the artifact once more, as though seeking an answer from it. The faint pulse of light that emanated from it seemed to grow stronger, reacting to her touch, to her thoughts. "We can't just destroy what we don't understand," she said. "We have to be smarter than that. The black sun's power isn't something that can be wiped out with a single strike. If we're going to win this war, we need to master it, or risk losing everything." Lyra nodded slowly, her face set with resolve. "And if we can't master it?" Vane's gaze hardened. "Then we'll destroy it ourselves. We won't let the Dominion or anyone else take it. The galaxy will not fall into eternal darkness, not while we're still breathing." The valiant star was still orbiting the remnants of the rift, its sleek form a symbol of hope against the vast unknown. Vane knew that their fight had only just begun. The Dominion would come for the artifact, and when they did, it would be a war like no other. One fought not with weapons, but with the very forces that shaped the universe itself. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. And Vane knew that, for better or worse, she and her crew were the ones who would decide its future. "Prepare the ship," she ordered, her voice steely. "We're heading back to the heart of the galaxy. There's a long road ahead, but we have no choice. The black sun's rise might be inevitable, but its reign will not be ours." As the crew moved to carry out her command, Vane stood on the bridge, staring out into the stars. The war they faced was far from over. The Dominion was just one part of the galaxy's dark tapestry, and the artifact was a key to something far greater. She couldn't ignore the feeling that what had just happened wasn't a victory at all, but merely a prelude to something far darker and more terrible. But as long as she breathed, Vane would fight. She had no other choice, not anymore. The universe was vast, but humanity had proven time and again that even in the face of impossible odds, it would find a way to survive, to fight back, to carve out a future. And that future was not going to belong to the Black Sun.